From The Times and The Sunday Times, this is The Story. I'm Luke Jones. Artificial intelligence is changing the way so many people study, design, write, research. Some are even getting relationship advice from chatbots. But perhaps more than any of these, it is the workplace that'll most be affected. And jobs. AI is already pushing up salaries at the top end of the tech sector. But what about entry-level jobs and graduate jobs? The first rung on the ladder, doing tasks which maybe large language models could do instead, for free. We will hear about one workplace very much living in the future. The story today, inside the AI workplace.
My name is Chris Stokel-Walker. I'm a technology journalist and author of How AI Ate the World.
There has been this growing drumbeat, Chris, of AI is coming for your job. Tech jobs, graduate jobs, admin tasks. It's not just that this is in the workplace, it sort of is taking people's work already, isn't it?
It is, and you need only look at the kind of top-down data, Luke, that we have. So the International Monetary Fund, the IMF, says that 40% of jobs will be affected in some way by the generative AI revolution. And just to kind of decode some of the terminology here, generative AI is basically that stuff that is post-ChatGPT, the creation of new content based on a prompt that you put in to a particular AI system. But then you can also look at the personal stories, and we've seen those. I've looked at those. You've spoken to people who have been affected by those. Individuals who have seen either their jobs slow to a trickle in terms of the work that is coming in, or have actually found themselves on the harsh edge of being fired because of it. And so this is not a kind of pie in the sky 5 years in the future issue that we have to talk about. This is something that is really coming down the road at us very quickly now. And we're starting to see, if not already, the kind of first tremors of this impact. We're starting to really build up pace and get to the actual earthquake itself.
And has it been a surprise to you about how quickly all of this has come about? I mean, ChatGPT is barely a toddler in human years, and yet already we're thinking about the disruption happening even beyond a tool like that.
November 2022, the chatbot was released and kind of managed to get 100 million users within a matter of months. Is now not really slowed down at all, actually. Sam Altman, the OpenAI CEO, recently posted figures that showed that he's had 100 million users pretty much joining every single month ever since. And so I suppose I'm not really that surprised at the speed of it. We have seen, and I am a tech skeptic, tech reporter, I always have a little bit of skepticism about some of the claims that these tech companies make. We've seen the promise of transformational technology many times before from these people. In fact, we've seen the transformational promise of AI from AI itself. This is a 70-year-old technology, first developed in 1956 and given that branding. And you can look back at the media coverage of the time in 1956, and it says 5 to 10 years hence, we will all be powered by robotics, and these AI systems will be doing everything that we do. And that didn't happen. But we are, I think, at the point where science fiction is starting to become science fact. And that is, I think, a really significant moment. And so in some ways, I wasn't surprised because of just how impressive ChatGPT was when it was released in November 2022. Just the way that it was asked to do this stuff. I was given kind of tasks by Times 2 to look at how generative AI can be used to change our lives. And actually, you did start to see the kind of inklings that something significant was happening. Now, this isn't super intelligence. This isn't the idea that suddenly we're going to have the Terminator overtaking us. But you could see where this technology could be used intelligently to try and automate some things that we don't like and to improve our working lives alongside that.
So, what might that actually look like?
My name is Jamie Hutton. I'm Chief Technology Officer and co-founder of Quantexa.
Jamie describes Quantexa as a decision intelligence company, essentially helping businesses organise huge masses of data they might have.
So it's ultimately about making the most of the data that you have for making decisions.
We're interested particularly in what is happening with people's working lives because of AI. You are a company which has a lot to do with AI, but has also made use of it in just how you do things as well. I wonder what your day is like, and if you could take us through, maybe from your first coffee in the office, what kind of time are we talking about? What kind of tasks does human Jamie have?
Well, I might even start before I get to the office, because I guess on the train on the way in, I might be summarizing my day ahead using Microsoft Copilot or using ChatGPT to look up a particular set of topics that we might be focusing on during the day. So even before I've got to the office, I'll be using ChatGPT to do things like understand what else are people doing out there, what are competitors doing, what are the similar offerings in the market.
And that's before he's even got to his desk. But once there and well into meetings, even they can be made more productive, he says, with an AI helping hand.
I might have a meeting to begin with at the beginning of the day at 9 a.m. And so we all come together, obviously leveraging both in-person but also virtual meetings, which of course you'd then use recordings and AI to summarize and to capture all the actions, all that kind of stuff.
So the action points are minuted for them. And when they set out to actually do the work, to design a new feature on a piece of software, for example, artificial assistance is there again.
We've got quite a few things we use internally in R&D. One, we've recently experimented with something called Google Agent Space. So like most companies, we have lots of different places and tools in which information is stored. We would have Microsoft Teams, we'd have Slack, we'd have Confluence, we'd have a whole load of a suite of tools. And actually, sometimes it can be quite hard to pinpoint where the information is you need. So what Agent Space allows us to do is connect up all those disparate sources, put a large language model on top of them and ask questions. So for this new feature, I want to understand any existing customers who've been requesting this feature. And so really being able to use a large language model on our internal data is really, really powerful there.
So after lunch, which was in no way aided by the internet, Jamie's developers need to actually start doing the work, coding in their example. And it is again sped up with the help of an AI toolkit.
They might use Claude Code or Klein. If you haven't heard of this before, what this is basically an agentic AI solution that allows it to understand your entire code base. So you put it on top of all your code that the product is built on, and then you can use it to do really a couple of things. One is ask questions of the code. So you can say like, what does this do? Or what is it? How does this piece of software function? And this is really great because of course, it is impossible for any one of my developers to know every piece of code in the stack. It's just not possible. Whereas obviously with a large language model, you can very easily pinpoint and understand what is going on in a particular area.
So you've done a bit of ChatGPT research first thing, had a meeting minuted on Teams, Agent Space helps you pinpoint the problem, Claude Code has helped you find the code you want to change, and then the actual work on the code has another digital helper, GitHub Copilot.
Yeah, Copilot is more targeted. It's like, I want to build a test for this in this area, or I want to change the way this code is structured. We call it refactoring, but do a really good job of those sorts of things. So it's a bit more sort of targeted. Think of it as a pair programmer for one of my guys. It's like having another person working alongside them and ultimately makes them much more efficient and more effective. So they're able to get more done in a shorter space of time. I like to describe it a little bit like, imagine the best graduate or junior engineer that you've ever come across. That's how good their code is. But they don't have any knowledge of your product or your code base at the moment you ask them about it. So
they need guidance.
You have to give it real direction in order for it to do the right thing.
So that surely, if you were equating it to like having a really good graduate, does that mean you're hiring less graduates?
It's a kind of a good question, right? And I do think you've got to think about your long-term hiring strategy when it comes to AI. I wouldn't say that it's stopping us hiring graduates, but it perhaps is, we're trying to change the focus of perhaps what we're looking for in people. So if you think about in the past, when we might have hired technical staff, we really cared what languages they knew, what coding languages they knew. Actually, I think what we're looking for now is more strategic thinkers, problem solvers, people who can connect a business problem to a technical solution, but the actual code they write and the language they know is not so important. So it's democratizing the coding aspect of the job, but it's not taking away the need for people really across all levels.
Even at junior levels?
Junior levels are probably what I would describe as the most at risk, I would say, in terms of, when you're acquiring, looking at your hiring strategy, because ultimately somebody who doesn't know the code base is in a very similar position to the AI. But it is really important that you plan in terms of your future workforce planning for the future. So you've got to be always growing the next level of people in any business. So I don't see it as we're never going to need to hire graduates anymore. But I do think you need to take it into account. You can't sort of bury your head in the sand and ignore the facts. So it's a balance, right?
But do you look back at your own rise up the ladder to the job you're now doing and think, oh, actually, there are a few rungs below there which actually now don't exist or might not need to exist because of these tools?
So interestingly, I started my career at a technical consultancy, and the first thing that I was doing was writing test scripts for software. I can assure you it was one of the most boring things I've ever done in my life, but everyone had to do a first few months of their role in one of the lower level positions. And I do think there are roles like that where honestly, AI is going to automate a lot of that away. So there are definitely points throughout my career where you might be thinking it's less of a role, with AI in the frame. That being said, I think the way that I've grown through my career, so much of it has been about that connection between the customer's business challenge that you're trying to solve and the technical solution to that problem. I think I really do describe this very much as it's not replacing creativity, architectural thinking. It's not replacing judgment, but it is definitely making our people more efficient and effective. And I think when you look at the roles that you're going to have, what you're really asking your people to do is have more output for the same amount of time.
So, Chris, thinking about what AI might mean for the jobs market, and we heard there Jamie talking about how swift it has made their coding practices in particular. What other kind of jobs or tasks have you heard of where it is foreseeable that AI can do this now? So here's your P45.
Yeah, filtering through vast amounts of data, I think, is one of those, and making linkages. So the idea of research, any sort of consultancy, can often be done by AI systems in a way that is much better and much quicker. And frankly, given the prices that some of those big four consulting companies charge, much cheaper as well. I've also seen and heard firsthand stories in the book of people who are involved in creative industries being affected by this. I talked to a guy called Pablo Xavier who decided to use AI to kind of generate artwork that he was then able to kind of make go viral. There was another guy called Alejandro Graue who was a voice actor. He voiced over YouTube videos, and up until December 2022, he would have a reputable, reliable stream of around about 30 videos every single month that he would voice over in different languages, basically taking English language YouTube content, changing it into Spanish language content. January 2023 comes about, and the company that he had been working for started to realize, hey, AI can do bits of this for me. So those 30 videos that he had every single month in December 2022 turned into 0 in 2023. So he decided he was going to try and retrain and do a different job. So all of those, I think, can be affected. The reality here, Luke, is that this is very much a white-collar industrial revolution. I think that is what is quite so different and significant about it, and frankly, truthfully, why we're talking about it on the Story podcast. We are the people who are going to be swept away in some ways by this, and therefore we have a stake in it. And unlike perhaps the Industrial Revolution a couple of centuries back, we're able to shout about it and to actually talk about it and think about what the impacts could well be.
It'll be hosting podcasts next, although minus the sparkling repartee.
Of course.
I assume. It's not just coming for white-collar jobs, though. It's also coming for entry-level white-collar jobs. And the big four accountancy firms have reported that their entry-level jobs in the past year are down 11 to 29%. And we've seen a lot of upset among graduates wondering where the jobs are that might lead them into those higher-paying white-collar jobs.
Yeah, this is the big challenge for Keir Starmer, for Peter Kyle, the Technology Secretary, for Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, and frankly, for all governments around the world, I think, is with the adoption of AI, we are generally seeing it being used in the same way that a graduate would, or a kind of a work experience person would. The best way that I equate generative AI is that it is like a kind of very fresh-faced, very over-eager graduate who is willing to do pretty much anything, and you can run them around a job in a very, very harsh way, but they might well make mistakes that you have to pick up and check on and ensure that you are making certain things before you actually start to share it publicly. The risk is that if we start to see that displacement of those roles with AI, which we are seeing, what happens to those graduates as they have to kind of go through the next stages of the workforce? One of the things that we've had, frankly, for centuries now in our careers has been this concept of the career ladder, right? You start off a job and you're not very good at it. You work your way around an office and you interact with your colleagues who maybe have more knowledge, more expertise, and you pick up stuff. Now, the risk here, I suppose, is we're in a kind of time of rupture, and an intergenerational gap is starting to open up and widening more significantly, because we hear a lot about how graduates, particularly post-COVID, are struggling often to understand the real world workplace and to pick up some of the skills that they need, often those softer skills. And those are the things that you pick up in the first 5 or 10 years of your career. Those higher level managers, either middle management, executives, or above, they are going to retire eventually. And in the past, we've just had the next generation coming up and taking their place. The fear here, Luke, is what happens when that generation, that earlier generation, hasn't had those formative experiences because their jobs have been supplanted, displaced, or augmented, however you want to describe it, by generative AI. So I am concerned about the graduates right now. Don't get me wrong. I think that is a real fear and a real risk. Many of our listeners will be parents of children or grandparents of children who are exceptionally worried about this. But I think that's kind of small fry compared to what happens 10, 20 years down the line. Because then you have these managers getting into these roles where they are expected to take on responsibilities and to understand the way of work that, frankly, they've had no experience of and they have no knowledge of. So what happens then?
So there's a tricky transition, but then also in terms of the end point, there is either a nightmarish future for, entry-level jobs where there just aren't any, and lots of people are going to be on benefits, or there might be a need for universal basic income or something to help people stay afloat. Or there is the utopian version where productivity, which has been elusive in this country for so many years, shoots up because actually, as a firm, you can do twice as much business with the same number of people and no one loses their jobs. Just everyone produces more because they've got these tools.
Yeah, UBI, by the way, is something that Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI, is believing will be necessary in the future.
This is where we say there are no jobs for you, so we're just going to pay you a sort of basic wage.
Yeah, precisely.
Me being the government.
Yeah, exactly. And frankly, Luke Jones for PM, gosh, can we imagine that world? That would be amazing. Yes, I think that the Sam Altman view of the future where we have nothing to do because AI has just displaced it all is Sam Altman being Sam Altman, thinking that his technology is the best thing in the world. And, it is beholden on him to try and say that because, frankly, he has, tens of billions of dollars of investment backing him, and ensuring that he gets that money coming in is incumbent on him saying this thing is going to change the planet in a really fundamental way. I do think that there will be improvements in terms of productivity. And I think that it's one of the things that the government at the minute is doing, which is welcome in many ways, is the recognition that actually, the educational curriculum is going to have to change to be more AI native. But absolutely, you can be way more productive with generative AI if you use it judiciously. There is kind of a combination of different bits of research that suggests that if you use it well, then you can really unlock some speed and pace that would be much needed, as you say, in our country. But then also, if you use it badly, then you run the risk of being gummed up and slowed down.
Do you think the government has a grip on this? And also, how big a problem do you think this is? I mean, are we staring down the barrel of a new industrial revolution? And have we got a government tinkering around the edges?
I do think this is a new industrial revolution. I think the reason why I forecast this as kind of the white collar revolution, and this being the fundamental difference, is because I do think that that is going to be quite how much this changes our world and our society. In terms of whether the government is up to it, Luke, you are asking the question of a person who FOI'd the government, and particularly the Tech Secretary, Peter Kyle, for his chatbot interactions, and learned that he basically asked it which podcast he should appear on. Sadly, the story was not on there, so I think that was probably an AI hallucination error rather than anything else. Look, honestly, I don't think the government does get it. And one of the issues is they are trying, but they are being led by necessity by industry. There is an over-reliance on consulting with them because we have a dearth of expertise. It's worth pointing out, even within industry, there is a dearth of expertise. That is why you see companies like Meta, Mark Zuckerberg's company, owns Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, and many others, chucking $100 million of salaries and bonuses at individual coders to try and get them to join the firm, because there isn't enough talent that natively understands AI and its impacts. We're kind of bringing a toy sword to a knife fight, and the tech companies themselves they have machine guns, and we're kind of playing with the stuff that you get when you go to a castle and go to the gift shop and start swinging that around, which is a problem because ultimately this is going to be an important technology. And I think that it requires some very serious thinking, and it requires us to trust that the AI companies are going to give us good advice and, frankly, honest advice about what sort of impact their tech will have.
Just finally, what about your own job and work, Chris? I mean, how much have you become more productive because of AI tools? How much of you fears that actually that piece you've written for Times 2 or something now actually could be maybe done by some generative AI? I mean, how are you balancing the upsides and downsides with your own job market?
With some complication, I suppose, is the answer. One of the things I think is important is that the best journalism is intensely personal, right? There's a reason why you left that question to the end, because it evokes the kind of personal response rather than the top-down blathering. Journalism is about connecting with individuals and teasing out of them the answers that are the most evocative and the most interesting. An AI can't do that. And I don't think an AI will ever be able to do that as well as the best journalists are able to do so. When I look at kind of the most important moments in my industry in journalism over, well, frankly, since the year dot, if you look at the Frost-Nixon tapes, if you look at some of the most evocative bits of journalism that you see, the reason why the Times magazine every weekend has these kind of intimate interviews with individuals, it is that personal connection that AI can't replicate. And I think that is the one thing that is worth taking away in a really scary time from this conversation, is that AI can transform our lives, it can maybe supplant some parts of our jobs, but also in the kind of melee of automation, it helps us reflect on what it is that makes us human. And it's about figuring out those bits that make us human and amplifying those where you find maybe a strategy for survival.
Tech journalist Chris Stokel-Walker, and we also heard from the Chief Technology Officer of Quantexa, Jamie Hutton, who definitely made me feel like I was living in the past as far as my work methods are concerned. Let us know what you think. Maybe you are in or hoping to go in a profession or an area that is on the front line of all of this. Or maybe you think it's got nothing to do with you. You're a mechanic or a grave digger. thestory@thetimes.com is our email. Today's producer was Edith Rousselot, the executive producer was Taryn Siegel, and sound design was by Hannah Varrell.
Our theme tune was composed by Mauro Seto.
I'm Luke Jones. See you soon.